That's kind of what part of my job is I run a blog or a podcast, and I also am an advisor to Earth observation companies, etc. That's just quickly about me. Just 3-4 lines. There's no one word to describe myself. I'm still figuring that out. That's a career challenge. How do you tell what you're doing in one line? I have to say 3 things because those are the 3 things that I do. So to kickstart the discussion, I think we're going to start with presentations from each of our panelists, and then there's going to be a discussion on the theme that we talked about, careers and the benefits of Earth observation. So to get started, let's start with presentations. I believe the first presentation is from Irene. I think we have the slides ready. I think you can get started, Irene.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. As you know, I'm Irene Parker. I'm really honored to be here. Flew in yesterday, so I'm no longer jet lagged. So I'm sorry that you guys have been underground for the past, I think, 3 days. Hopefully you guys will get out of here and enjoy the nice weather and go around and eat some tasty food. But for my area, I have just 2 slides, and this slide for me is what's really key. The top right-hand corner is just basically showing you for the past over 100 plus years, the temperature changing in the world, right? So climate change is here. The data that we get from Earth observations, historical and now, are showing that. On the left-hand side, you're seeing our flood inundation mapping. This is key part of climate change also. You know, go out California, Italy, etc. Floods are happening, it's happening hard, our coastal areas are changing. How can Earth observations actually make an impact on how we do regulation and decision making across the board? The bottom right-hand corner, that's from the US perspective of our billion-dollar disasters. The reason that's important is that it impacts people who are gonna give me money to be able to do Earth observations. So all the Earth observations we do, for me, what's really important is translating it down to how it actually impacts the economy. Because that gets at least my organization funding to be able to make these key observations. And in the 80s, we had less than $30 billion disasters in the US. Now in 2020, we're about close to $130 billion disasters. That's 4-fold increase from, you know, the 80s to now. What does that mean? We need to actually be investing in our Earth observations and actually using the data, not just for weather prediction, but using it in the areas of farming, in the agriculture area. We have to be looking at it from a commodities market perspective. We have to be looking at it from a derivatives market perspective. We have to be also, of course, looking at it from a science perspective. But the key thing is that we have to be able to translate what this actually means to the users, which are the citizens of the world. And one of the things I've been noticing in this job is that sometimes we talk about sensors and Earth observations, but we're not actually talking about that final end user impact. And that's the area that we've been changing inside NOAA. We're talking about the firefighters for wildfire and how that's impacting them, how that's impacting home insurances, it's how it's impacting just people's daily lives. And what I can tell you is my entire background, I am not a physicist, I don't have a PhD. I came from a math major from Johns Hopkins, and I was in investment banking as where I started out in the derivatives market. I then switched over into consulting, loved it because it was, you know, finite jobs, you can go in and help solve a problem. And then I went into the US government side, and I will tell you, I was in my earlier part of my career, it was all about my bank account and how I could get out of being financially dependent from my parents to actually taking a pay cut and going into public sector and doing good. And this is why I'm trying to do good. It's about the Earth observations, about the climate. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I don't want her in a situation where, if you look at Jackson, Mississippi right now in the States, you can't get clean water because the infrastructure is broken. Why is the infrastructure broken? It was because of flooding. Did we actually know that flooding was actually happening? Yes, we have the data to do that, but we're not making that impact. We've got to be able to change those regulations. So my perspective to you all is, you don't have to be a scientist, but it's great if you are, but really think about that end user, think about why you want to do it. Sometimes the job can be underappreciated and you work really long hours, but just think about the generations that you're going to impact because of these Earth observations. And it's mind-blowing. I talked to my daughter about it, and she's like, why are you working, 80-hour weeks? You're not getting paid to do that. And I said, it's not that I'm not getting paid to do it. It's because of you, kid, and your kid that you're going to have, and their kid. And I want you to be able to have all the wonderful things that I grew up with. I don't want you to be in a situation where your home is flooded. I don't want you to be in a situation where, the foods that you like are no longer available to you. I don't want you to be in a situation where your financial portfolio is no longer available to you. So this is why I see Earth observations as a key area for people to go into in the societal impacts. The next slide. This is an international community, so it's not all about NOAA. So I know a lot of you guys are looking into careers and how to get into the Earth observations field. You have NOAA, you have our international partners, but let me tell you, you have our commercial partners too. And they are looking for you all, the talent that's in this room, and the talent can be everywhere from science, math, communication, marketing. It is a global problem, climate change, and we have to globally, this community has to actually go after it, and it has to be interdisciplinary. So do not think that if you're not a scientist like me, that you can't make an impact, because you sure can. I'm sitting here right now and I'm telling you can. You just have to persevere, and you have to be able to communicate, and you have to have a true passion for it. And I think that we can do something really good in this world, and you guys are the next generation to make that happen. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Irene. I think that was a very good first presentation to get some context on Earth observation. And I think Irene showed an infographic in the previous slide that summarized all the disasters of NOAA. And I've looked at several company pitch decks, presentations of companies that went public. That's the data set that they use is, we're going to have to solve problems. And, they use this figure as an example to show that there are, disasters happening around the world. So I'm just trying to say that the work that, the organizations like NOAA do is, impactful in a private sector for a startup that is working on something completely different in agriculture or in insurance. And this is the image that they use, so just to connect the dots. So that was a great presentation. The next presentation is from Pooja Pandey from Planet, and one of the themes that we're going to talk about in the discussion that's going to follow is the role of the private sector and how it is complementary. What the satellites that we saw before, the previous slide, I love that infographic because it shows all the weather satellites, and one of my controversial views about the space industry is if you do one thing in space, it's probably just weather. So that previous slide summarized all the weather satellites, but it's complementary to what the private sector is going to bring in. And let's hear from Pooja about Planet and what they do.
Thank you. Hi everyone. I'm sure I've met most of you for the last few days, but hello again, my name is Pooja and I'm from Planet. For the next few minutes, I just want to talk a little bit about what Planet does and where your future careers fit within Planet's roadmap. So our motto has always been that you can't fix what you can't see, and this is why what we're talking about today and what all of the work that you can do in the future is very important. So I just wanted to mention a little bit about our fleet. So we've got SuperDots, which is our medium resolution 3-meter satellites, and if you haven't seen them, we do have a model in the workshop room. We are in Boston, so when you do your round, you'll see one of them. And we also have our high-res fleet, which is SkySat, which is at 50 centimeter resolution, and we've got about 21 of them up in space today, and they are tasking only, so you can actually pick a targeted area and they will take an image of that specific area. This is actually a video, but if it doesn't work, it's okay. It's also on YouTube, but this is basically showing how the way that our fleets work, and the Delps go in a line scanner in the sun-synchronous orbit, and the SkySats are in a high elliptical orbit. So just a quick video, but we can go to the next slide. So Planet here is uniquely situated to serve a bunch of industry needs. So we go all the way from defense and intelligence, all the way to agriculture, insurance, mapping, and we've got a few use cases towards the end of the slides that I will also present to you. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the programs that we run within Planet to get data, to have data open and accessible to everyone. So we actually work a lot with DLR in the research program. So this is Planet data that's open to the German research community. We also work with ESA EarthNet, and we got the CSU program and Copernicus Masters, and I also just wanted to briefly highlight that we recently closed a deal with the German federal government where we are giving data away to 439 German federal agencies as with Planet. So, go to the next slide. So, one of the programs that I work with, and I work with very closely, is the Make Free program, which works with which is funded by the Norwegian Climate Initiative, and we actually work with them to create these monthly base maps that are available in the tropics, so between 30 degrees north and 30 degrees south, and they're monthly mosaics with RGB and also the near infrared band, so visual and analytic purposes. And this is a program that you can sign up for, and you can get access to this data under a non-commercial license. This is another video, and if it doesn't work, it's okay. But this is going to show some changes that you can record with the base map that we have. Oh, maybe it's working. Oh, no. Oh, there it is. Okay. So we actually created this video over a span of 3 years to show the deforestation taking place over an area. Yeah. So you can see here the dates. And you can see the deforestation that happened and illegal agricultural fields that are coming into play here. So this is just some of the example of what you can do with high cadence temporal and high cadence imagery with Planet's fleet. Oh. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the use cases of Planet Imagery. I have been working with the food security group here at this conference, and one of the use cases that I wanted to highlight was we worked with NASA Harvest to create a map of Togo. Togo is a small country located in West Africa, and it's got a width of about 115 kilometers. And we worked with them to create a countrywide map of cropland as part of an effort to distribute aid to farmers to boost food production, and we were able to task the satellite, get the images, and create the map within 10 days and deliver it to the government of Togo. So if you go to the next slide, we can see the changes that we saw, so where the crop probability is and where there isn't. This map was basically used for a government-funded program within Togo itself to give funds to farmers who are in need. This is just a little comment from NASA Harvest about the imagery that we provided them with. And this map was actually created with Sentinel-2 data along with Planet data, so we actually fused the two data sources. Secondly, I'm sure you've all heard of the devastating floods that have been happening in Pakistan. And we actually created this example of where those two red circles are. You can see over a span of 7 days, really apocalyptic flooding that happened over that area. And you can also zoom in using our 3-meter imagery to really measure the areas that have been destroyed due to the floods. I think the last one. So again, a NASA Harvest example. So we did work with them to create maps over Ukraine. About 22% of the country's land is under Russian control, and we created these maps to provide them with to basically measure the impact of the war in Ukraine. So, yeah, I think that's the last slide. Thank you.
Brilliant, thanks Pooja. That was a great presentation. The reason that I loved the presentation was there was one slide that was actually your 2 slides talking about space, and the rest of the slide was just talking about the impacts, and that was great because it also went through different parts of the world and different industries, and that's kind of where the value of Earth observation lies. So thanks for Pooja for the presentation. Next, the presentation is from Kathleen Shons, and she's representing NOAA, and she's going to be discussing about the underlying tools that are important for getting all these impacts derived. So let's hear from Kathleen.
Thanks, Armin. So you get to look at me, but we could actually go to Irene's slides as well. I just want to have a conversation with you all. So we're talking about career. We're talking about global assets. We're talking about global observations to solve a global issue. And I think when I look at you all, knowing where I came from and my background in atmospheric science, the motivation to not just fix climate change, but to monitor it and to improve the world. That's huge. And I think I can say and trust that that's a motivation for most of the people in this room. Our world is changing. We see it, right? We saw the floods in Pakistan. Those are unprecedented. In the US, we have a metric of 100-year flood. We have those every year. And yes, it's an aggregate, but it's showing a shift in climate. So, in terms of data, that's where I want to come and talk to you all. You heard from Dr. Bowles, I work on the infrastructure side. I didn't come to Earth observations through any career in satellite. I came from a lifelong love of atmospheric science and wanting to be impactful in climate change. So I came through the scientific side, but I have not done research since I have graduated. Instead, I focused on where is the impact, where is the application. There are a lot of brilliant scientists in the world, but I don't know about you, but finding data, accessing it, making it useful, took the majority of the time in my collegiate career to develop a thesis. That has changed. The tools, the availability of data. It used to be governments flying these beautiful satellites that would then be input into numerical weather prediction, and then maybe you saw the output. We all have access to that data now. We have technology that's foundationally disrupted this world, and we have the emergence of commercial companies to help us partner with that on a governmental side. And what does that mean for new careers? Well, it's foundationally shifted mine. I now, as someone who honestly knew basic Microsoft skills going into college, to now lead the development of a cloud-based IT infrastructure to serve the organization, I learned. And I think that's the key. If you want to look at the problems, you want to solve these challenges to the world, you can come at it from the Earth observation side, you can come at it from a science side, you can come at it from math. You can look at it from multiple different angles. The key is you have the initiative and you're willing to open your aperture. Yes, that's a fun little nerdy comment there. But to be willing to take that chance. If there's a need and there's an opportunity, you need clear communication skills. But I would say the growth, the interdisciplinary nature of our world is foundationally different. You can be a social scientist and impact this. You can come from communications. We need everyone working together. It's not just the world of the subject matter expert where you know this one instrument or you know this one model. We all have to work together, and it's that world that opens this myriad of possibilities that really will take us and you all into your next role. So I'm really excited to talk with you all a little bit about career paths, where that's going to take. And I think the key to it is also, it's not a singular world. It's not the US government providing data to everyone. We have all these observations. We have all of these companies. And we're solving global problems. So it's how do we partner across agencies, across companies to get to that point? And where can we take those paths internally? So foundationally then, I'm using that word again, there is the need for a very diverse group of not only expertise, but of people who understand their relative challenges to their communities, to their countries, and it's pairing together to work on those. Think through you beautifully enumerated some of those opportunities, working cross-cutting from NASA to Togo. Those are the types of opportunities we will see right? It's government partnering with companies to solve global problems. And you can be approaching that from any side of the space community. Earth observations is foundational, is key to us being able to not only monitor our current world, but also pivot us to helping to solve those problems prognostically via through climate models. And monitoring would also help with, understanding of the greenhouse gas emissions and how that's changing over time. We saw the power of what it means to observe an ozone hole. Yes, you guys, that existed back in the day. I don't know if you heard about that. But we were able to monitor that and actually understand the ramifications not only, but the impacts and how we solve it. So in this world, there are so many diverse careers and pathways you can take. And so I'm really looking forward to your discussion points and how data is kind of become the real clear combining factor of those. So thank you all very much.
Thanks very much, Catherine. I think that was a very different presentation compared to the others, but I guess the impact is still the same because I looked at everybody and they were all intently listening. So, there was still, even if you don't have visual slides, if you're, saying important things, people will still listen without a visual aid. I think that's the proof for that. From there, I think she touched on a lot of topics, and you're going to touch on that during the discussion. So we talked about technology, we talked about the impact, we talked about the need for different skills and the application of Earth observation. And for the last presentation, we're going to hear from Parag Saze, and he represents IAF, and he's going to touch on a very important topic, which is international collaboration, because as Catherine mentioned, this is a global observation aimed at solving a global problem, so we need global actors involved. So let's hear from Parag.
Yeah, good day everybody. Hope you're having a good activity here going on. So as mentioned, my name is Parag Vaze. I'm a project manager at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I've been there for 30 years, working on a whole suite of different kinds of Earth remote sensing missions, and working on various aspects of it, right from doing CNDH flight software in assembly, by the way, to all kinds of other avionics, and now as project manager have learned, I would say pretty much a very diverse set of engineering, science, data management topics, and frankly that's been, I think, the most interesting and satisfying portion of my job, is being able to be exposed to a lot of these different areas. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I would say, my observation over my last 30 years of how things have changed over time. And so I think one of the things when I first started working totally new to the satellite industry, right from college, that was amazing to be able to work on a satellite, period. But as we started in that time space, that was fairly new. I think industry did it, but government was much more involved in that area. And also on the sensors, that was also a relatively new field in inventing those sensors and demonstrating improving those sensors. And over time, those developments have matured, and I think an incredible amount of sensors are available now, and I'm calling them sort of a growing spectrum of tools. When I was looking at the slide myself from JPL, I was amazed at all of the different kinds of measurements that are available, and available not only currently flying, but sensors that have been flown, the data collected. And almost all of my missions over the last 30 years have all involved international collaboration. So I've been lucky to actually see the fruits of that, because being able to be exposed on solving these problems, right from ultimately the goal from a science user application perspective, but it starts finally at the person level, and being able to work with these diverse sets of people across all over the world has really enabled the development of a lot of these sensors and technologies over the last 30 years. So there are, I would say, a huge amount of sensors and data being put together, available, flying, and now the question is, what to do with all of that data. So can you go to the next slide, please? So I think when I started working on projects, everything was centered around build the satellite, build the sensor, provide this data. And I think even the project development has evolved, where right in the beginning of projects, I think we're thinking of not just the flight development, but not just the ground development, not even just the data processing, but really how do we get it out to the community? How do we enable that? How do we train the community and enable to access it? How do we advertise the availability of this data so that people will actually want to use it? Because finally, a lot of inventions are things where they are inventions. Build it, make that data available, and people will use it. But people need to know about it, and people need to know about how to actually use it. So besides creating that data, I've seen tremendous evolution in the importance and buildup of this infrastructure Catherine was just talking about to be able to enable this. So I think we are kind of looking at how we're going to be able to enable the fundamental science, which I think a lot of the projects that I've worked on, particularly earlier in my career, really focused on that. How do we get scientific data? How do we publish papers? How do we get science articles out there? And now I'm seeing really over the last 30 years a progression of, I would call it the value-added chain, where I see not just stopping at that point, but really how do we make that available to the world for these more societal applications for it? And then as I said, because of the massive amount of data, not just looking at how do we provide data, but how do we actually provide information that's actionable and not just raw data that is primarily was first geared towards scientists and looking at fundamental science. Thanks. So I saw this this graphic, I would say maybe a year ago, and I latched onto it immediately because it really resonated with exactly the theme I was just telling you, where there's this base of data providers, all of these things, but really where is the vision, where are we headed, and what's really the most utility as we're developing systems and infrastructure and user communities and so forth. But it's really moving up this value chain, this pyramid, where we're going from data to information to knowledge, and that knowledge really being able to inform whether it's business aspects that we were talking about earlier, or laws, policies, and emergency management and so forth. So to me, all of the development I'm seeing, and I don't just mean development from just purely a project side, but from a people side, the people that I'm working with, the diversity of the people I'm working with, because they're really having to form this end-to-end sort of information system, going from producing the data to actually making it available as information that people can utilize, whether it's business or any other communities, and ultimately, hopefully, to make some decisions, again, on a diverse set of topics. Fundamentally, I've been most interested in the science aspects, which are very global, but I think it's an explosion. And when I first started working on these projects, I was talking to one of the project scientists at NASA headquarters, and I asked him, hey, we're making all this data and we're making it all available free to the world. And he said, yes, that is the sign of success, where we want the world to be able to utilize this. And that is, it really resonated with me as not just the basic engineering requirements. The requirement for success is getting that out to the world and having the people actually use it, and frankly, in the end, maybe demand it for us to continue that process. That's it. Thanks.
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks, Parag. I think that was great. I love this infographic. I'm probably going to refer it in one of my blogs, because this is summarizing the state of Earth observation, and if I can kind of improve that, is the space industry basically ends at the data layer. I know we are at the Space Generation Congress, and everyone here is kind of a space nerd, but the beauty is the space industry's abstraction ends at the data layer, and a lot of work happens above, and that means that we need to start working with all those actors in order to help them understand how they can use the data, and if they can use the data, if it is useful for them, what else is needed, things like that. So it's a beautiful infographic. Thanks, Parag. Let's get the panel discussion started. But before that, I wanted to get a sense of, for the purpose of time, how many of you after these presentations have questions for the panel? Just raise your hands. Okay, you have quite a few questions, because I have questions, but I ask questions and talk to them a lot. I've chatted with them before, so instead of just me asking the questions, it's probably better. But maybe one question that I will ask, and to set the stage, is something that we were chatting before about how Earth observation has become from a very vertical area to very horizontal, meaning it was considered to be a science, it was applied to only a specific type of people, specific type of engineers or scientists, but now, we need a lot more, right? So that's been the shift in the industry, and that is why we need, or there is a career shift happening in Earth observation, because the theme of the panel being, exploring careers in Earth observation, right? And if you had thought about it, you would have just considered science, a remote sensing scientist or a data scientist, or perhaps, on the engineering side, designing these satellites. But there's more to that, and we know that. And I wanted to ask the panel this question, and then I'll get to the questions if that's okay with you. So, I don't know, Irene, you want to get started in terms of how the shift is happening in the industry?
Like we were talking about, I think the shift is, you definitely have the core aspect of remote sensing scientists and having the engineers, but I think that going forward and making yourself more multidimensional, learning the finance associated with it, learning the economics, taking a public policy class and understanding how, if we go back to your infographic, right, if we're going, for me, my bread and butter is climate change and making that impact. I don't want to observe it, I want to change it, right? And to be able to change it goes back to those actions, the laws and policies and preparations. So if you guys are engineers and scientists in the room, learn the public policy. You need to understand the regulations behind it. You need to understand how your lawmakers work, and how to actually take the observations and the products that we create and turn them into something that's meaningful. So I really focus. I will tell you, I went from a math degree, and then I got a degree in public administration, and I got a degree in business management. So I really do believe it's very important to understand both the financial and economics associated with Earth observations and products and services, and the regulation aspect of it to be able to make societal changes associated with it.
Just to extend from what you said, for me, the greatest gap that I'm seeing is at Planet we have around 6 petabytes of archived data that's available, and we have users that come to us and say, we have a question, how can we solve this question with your data? And what we have done before, we can replicate it for them, and we show them that it's possible. So we're looking at other soft skills that are needed, where you build empathy with the end user, and you create use cases, and you understand how to build solutions off of the products to go up this pyramid, or up the chain here, all the way to knowledge and wisdom is, what has been done before, and can it be applied to other use cases?
Yeah, I love this graphic. It's pretty. I wish I had come up with it. I think it explains kind of exactly the amount of horizontal knowledge that is existent in the soil in that base layer. And as Irene mentioned, the need to go vertical to make impact. I would say, from my perspective, the area of growth is really in getting towards information out of data. For a long time, we've been providing data in its native format, in a very specific meteorological use, which if I hand to an economist or I hand to a data scientist, they will look at it and say, how do I do anything with this? So it's not only about, from a US government side, making our data available, it's making it actionable and useful. And more than that, accessible. To get to global impact, you have to be able to provide that data. And it's not just, okay, here's a portal, come get it, good luck with the format, we'll see you later. You have to be able to work along that vertical chain to impart value that will help everyone. Because together with industry, together with other governmental organizations and the policymakers, that's how this change gets impacted. So the actual type of data, where it's provided, how it's provided, is really empowered by technology. And something we haven't really talked about is the use of AI, right? The driver behind that is massive amounts of data. But it doesn't happen magically. You have to train the data sets to build that, to get the information. All of those tools, though, they didn't exist when I was in graduate school. I'm not a million years old, but you could maybe create it and then maybe get some analytics from data if you were going to stay at a grad degree for 7 years. You can build that. You can deploy that onto the Microsoft Cloud like that. They offer you the tools to switch, to change. But you have to be able to access the data in the right formats to get to that point. But it's this democratization of Earth observing data that is where we need to invest. And it's how do you create the right formats? How do you create those portals? How do you create the ability to know where that knowledge can be found to move up the chain?
I'll keep it very brief. I think, again, centering around this theme, but I guess my comment would be to the question is, yes, we need a very diverse set of skills. I think we talked about that. But I think the thing I see a lot is I see a lot of infusion of people with individual skills in data, in IT systems, et cetera, science. There are much fewer, and I would say much higher demand, from my perspective, of people who are actually multidimensional and I would say have a very multidisciplinary systems engineering. In fact, at JPL we've invented a new specific job category for science system engineering, which the idea is to actually have a system engineering kind of role that's multidisciplinary with that. So it's I would say that's just my comment, meaning it's not just the individual layers, it's actually the bridging of those.
Brilliant, thanks, Parag. I think that was a very good comment, and it reminds me, I wanted to just add one thing. I was speaking to someone in the earth observation industry, and she was telling me, do you know what the weirdest role in earth observation would be in the future, especially as we're talking about actions and impact and how we can take data from, collecting from satellites to getting it impacted. And, I said, perhaps a marketer, communicator, software developer, and her answer was, no, it's actually a neuroscientist or a psychologist, because you have all this data, but if you communicate it in a way that we are used to seeing, which is a time series, maybe that's not a good way to show it to a politician or to, a change maker. Maybe you need to create a narrative around it, understand how their brain works, how a human brain works, how a human brain behaves, and what can, make change happen is neuroscience, because you need to understand how humans absorb data, right? So it made a lot of sense, and, I think it goes back to what Parag was talking about, and you need a combination of all of that as a multidisciplinary audience, and I think I really think it's an important part that is not highlighted enough, especially in Earth observation, the need for multidisciplinarity. So yeah, with that, I think we'll go to the audience question. I think we saw 4 or 5 hands. I think we should cover all of them before the end of the session. Please introduce yourselves, and then if you're pointing to someone, just mention their name. Thank you.
Howdy, my name is Jack. I'm a graduate student in Boston, and I guess I wanted to know what y'all's thoughts were on, so as this industry develops, and as government continues to play a very major role in this, do you see the roles of the satellite operators as being predominantly that, like satellite operators providing raw data and having other actors handle the other steps of the pyramid, or do you see your organizations like directly get involved with the full pipeline more and more so?
I think it's going to be a very hybrid approach. So inside NOAA, we're already looking at how can we use commercial services from everything from mission operations. We just finished a pilot with Microsoft Azure to be able to actually command and control one of our satellites. I think we'll be looking at commercial services for data acquisition. I think we'll be looking at commercial services for maybe products and services and even information. But I do believe that from a government perspective, those observations are core to our business, for society, and keeping that in that public sector is very key. But that does not mean that there isn't a tight integration with our private partners. And I think it's just finding that balance. Going back to what everybody said, making that data available freely and equitably is very key. And making sure that there's a long-term record of that data is very key. So I think that there is a very key part that will stay a government area, but I do think there's a significant role in private partnerships, public-private partnerships.
Yeah, the longevity of those satellite observations and the stability of them over time. When you talk about monitoring climate, that's absolutely critical. We will always have a role in that from a governmental perspective. That is huge value add to the entire world by providing those. But it's the synthesis of the data as we move along that value chain into information, into impacting policy, and bringing together the stakeholders into a more cogent discussion. So it's not just, oh, here's a product, throw it over the fence. You interpret it, good luck. We have to move away from that. And so that is that you hear us talk about public-private partnerships from a governmental perspective. You also hear us talk about use of new technology. It's that hybrid, it's blending it all together to provide more information in ways that people think. Social science is so key to that. And that will help us to then inform and solve those higher order policy levels. But I do think it is a responsibility of the government to help facilitate that end-to-end discussion in a meaningful way.
Hi, my name is Roxy Williams, and I am currently working in a project that is using data to find suitability for shelters in the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua. So I wanted to know your perspective on how do you think it's important that the local communities who use this data to find maybe solutions or propose solutions to some of the issues that they have in their communities understand, but at the same time be able to be then processing these images as well. And the other question was that how do you think is also important the combination of traditional ecological knowledge with technology itself or the processing of this data? Thank you.
Thank you, that's a great question. To answer your first question, so I have worked personally with regards to the Imagery project that I showed before, where we did mosaics over the tropical areas. We have worked very closely with local communities to understand their use case and to train them on how to use the data. So we're understanding what their questions are, what are the answers that they're looking for, and how they can use our data to get there.
And this involves a lot of, and going back to the careers for that, but this involves a lot of soft skills, so you have to really understand how to work with the customer. You're always customer facing, so it's less of a technical role, but it's very, very important in narrowing down the use cases and taking them back and seeing if we can integrate them when we're building a platform. Because if you have this question, others have this question as well. And your second question about working with Indigenous groups specifically, so we have worked with the group of Earth observation, with the Indigenous communities there, with the Indigenous group there, and we have hosted a lot of hackathons and webinars with them on how they can access the data, on how they can use it. So it's again going back to the point of a lot of partnerships and really shedding light on what the questions are and how we can help answering them with our data, and also having some programs that allow them to access data as well.
Just one thing to add on the infrastructure aspect that you brought up. So from the NOAA perspective, we started putting all of our data into Amazon Cloud and Microsoft and Google. So we know that it's very challenging for people to be able to use our data, to download the data and then buy their own infrastructure. So we're trying to solve that problem. So one of the things that we've done at NOAA now is that if people need to download our data from the cloud, that cost is no longer a burden on them. So we've covered the egress costs associated with it, again, with the importance that we make our data free and open. The second thing is that because we put it in the cloud, they are providing a significant cost discount, I'll be honest, from this public-private partnership, especially in Amazon and Microsoft Azure, to folks that need it to be able to actually process that data in the cloud. So you're no longer having to move that data. And being able to do it at 2 in the morning your local time does make it significantly cheaper, but it's something that we're very aware of at NOAA, and we're trying to make sure that not only is our data free and openly accessible, but when new products and services and information need to be created, how do we make that cost effective to that end user to be able to create that? And that's something very important to us, and we're taking that extremely seriously.
I just want to make a quick comment. So maybe not exactly addressing your question, but maybe a comment on that. One of the things I'm particularly interested in is this question where a particular application in various places and countries that people think needs a lot of money and investment and infrastructure and so forth, which sometimes it does. But I think there are things that existing agencies and communities can actually provide with almost little or no funding, which is really what's sort of the problem you're trying to solve. And a lot of times this data, this information is available, but even getting understanding of where and how, Kathleen was saying about doing her thesis or whatever, where it's first, presenting a problem, but just even understanding how to approach it, where to find the data, and we have all of these data streams and how to maybe marry those data together to actually solve those. And we're really trying hard, I'm trying hard as part of this GIAS subcommittee to actually enable ways of having people and making connections with those subject matter experts, maybe the agencies, where it really doesn't cost any money. It's about just advice and consultation.
Probably one last question, because you're running out of time.
Hi, I'm Lucy from Chile, and you talked a lot about sustainability and yesterday about holistically sustainability with satellites, but no one has mentioned the dark and quiet skies. You say that we can't fix things that we can't see, and DART's mission is around the corner, and we use telescopes for planetary defense. How can we fix something if we can't see because satellites, you are blocking the view? And my question is, related to this, is what are the challenges what are the sets of skills that you are requiring and the opportunities that you are providing so we can work on that program? What type of people are you hiring? How are you addressing that problem that we didn't create but we have to solve? So what opportunities and skills are you doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you're actually sitting right in front of two of my colleagues who are probably better suited to answer this question. But just speaking broadly in terms of hiring, so we're hiring at Planet a range of positions right now. So we're looking at a lot of artificial intelligence machine learning engineers, but we're also looking at more people with softer skills who want to work on more customer-facing roles. But on the space system side, I'm not there, so I'm going to direct your question to them. They're right there, and they will answer it. Sorry to put them on the spot, but.
Hi, yeah, also Planet, my name is Stefan. So I think this is a very, not just like convoluted, like going both ways, basically, this problem. Like you can't fix what you can't see, are you looking above or are you looking down, right? And I would say, like, from our perspective, the number of planet satellites that we have is large for this amount of constellation. It's probably not like blocking the entire sky, like for example, Starlink is at the moment, and like we gotta always spread. So I would say this is a very tough topic that we want to have, also being conversant in the future. And I think like one of the major things that we can also do is like follow best practice guidelines that we have in the industry. Like we're trying to, for example, we're investing a lot in like orbital models that are making sure that, for example, our satellites are deorbiting within 5 years. So we're trying to get our satellites down, get them out of the view basically as soon as we can, so that we then don't block like the view out that you're looking at and referring to in this regard. Anything to add to the question?
I'll just add that for the U.S. federal government, we have a program, if any of you guys are going to the IAC next week, Space Situational Awareness and Space Situational Traffic Management. So we know that there's a lot of space junk. Some operational, some not. And how are we going to deal with that? And this is not just a U.S. problem, it's a global problem. And it's all going to be associated with not just best practices, but are we going to have policy associated with it? How are we going to share our data of where our satellites are? Are we going to agree to deorbit at a certain time? All of those things need to be discussed at an international level. It cannot be done locally, but there will be deeper discussions on that. But if you Google space situational awareness, NOAA, you'll see our latest program and the latest tools that we've designed to help hopefully remove some of this space junk out there.
That's it. Do we have time for one more question?
Okay, just
Okay, one last one. Make it controversial again if you want.
Hi, my name is Kevin, and I wanted to ask you guys about sort of an adjacent topic to that of as satellites are increasingly in our skies and are deorbiting, and we're having more and more rockets going through, most of our planetary observation data of the atmosphere is focused on the troposphere. And how are you guys looking at sort of expanding that data collection to also include stratospheric effects and seeing what black carbon or the ionized aluminum as more and more things come and deorbit in the upper atmosphere, where they don't have the same cycles we have closer to the ground?
That was an easy one, right? I think it's getting to look at where you're tuning, right? The atmospheric window is going to tell you about where black carbon is. You can tune the instruments to the correct channels to be able to observe that and understand then basically where it is relative to the atmosphere. So many of the instruments that we fly that have a long-lived lifespan in NOAA are sensitive to the stratosphere. You're right, in the troposphere is where we're generally monitoring a lot of these things, but many of our greenhouse gas instruments are very sensitive to the stratosphere, understanding it's a different world in terms of the longevity of those species in the stratosphere, because they may or may not interact with sunlight directly, they may or may not have volatile chemical compounds that enable that. So I do think we are observing it it is becoming a much more critical field to understand stratospheric observations. But we're looking beyond that too into space weather and the heliospheric elements too. So it is about monitoring up and down, but it is a global system. And knowing that tropospheric injections, right, we're able to model lightning actually catalyzing ozone, and you can do it with tropospheric injections into the stratosphere, and you can monitor that, the tropospheric folding. So I would say we are working on that. We are tuning products and services towards that more holistic vertical integration, not the total column, as opposed to just surface-based observations, because those are what's going to be more impactful in those climatological models too. So from a NOAA perspective, at a minimum, that is a key scientific observation for us, and we really are going to continue to provide that data with a lot of our low Earth orbiting instruments.
All right, hope that question was answered. I think we're done, right? Victoria, we're done. There is still one person who's just kept us out.
We'll do one final, very brief question, please, and then we'll move on. Thanks.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
Hello, my name is Lord Bento. I'm the outgoing Weather-Based colleague for Space Generation Advisory Council, and I'm also a software developer at a company in Ghana called Pharma. It's a health tech company. So there's a question on, there was a point on how the industry is changing and how there is this new paradigm where we have data being available on the internet when some years back that was not the case. Speaking from my experiences in maybe Ghana, I think the issue on the multidisciplinary challenges is maybe something that we are yet to overcome. You pick up skills in one sector, but then to pick up the other skills in other sectors requires some education or some training that might be either expensive or not happening quickly enough to pick up the right skills to be able to deliver. So I'm just wondering maybe what do you think in developing countries we can do to better leverage this data? We do have a growing maybe software developer ecosystem, but I don't think it requires just software developers to just fetch the data and just present it. So we need some extra understanding as to which parts of the data is useful, and then how that can be impactful to other areas. I don't know if there is something like resources or areas that we can look at to improve the multidisciplinary nature of our industries in the developing countries. So if you have any suggestions or any projects in that direction, that's my question.
I can just, I was coming back to the comment I made earlier about, I think, at least in the various projects and communities that I'm involved with, whether it's science teams, applications teams, and so forth, we're really thinking global. And I think teaming up with people and including submitting proposals, funded proposals even, I think is available. I think this is where I was saying earlier, even if things are made available, knowing what's out there and how to guide you towards those things are things, I think there's still a gap there in terms of making those connections. And that's why I think, at least as I said earlier, I'm trying through conferences, other committees, and participation, partnering with other groups who are in touch with developing countries and agencies and partnerships there. Making that connection is very important. I think there are avenues for that, but finding them and making that connection is I think, still a missing element that we want to improve on.
Brilliant. I think that answered the question. The one thing that I'll add is adding on to what Parag was saying. There is a communication gap, and then once that communication gap is fixed, the disciplines will start coming together on their own. And I think that's where, I guess, conferences like this helps, where, you know, we talk about what the impact of the data is, and, you know, that can then probably spark an idea. Maybe your background is, you know, something else, or you know someone who's doing something else where they can use the data, and, you know, the space industry can almost become a bridge for taking Earth observation data outside the space industry itself. So, you know, we all need to be communicators, I think. All right, thank you. Thanks very much for the questions, and thank you very much to the panel for making the presentation and answering all the questions. Hope that was useful and insightful, and I think they will be here around. I don't know if all of them are around, but I think they're going to be around if you have more questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we switch to the next panel, would it be possible for the delegates that are on the sides, please, to center a tiny bit so people that are sitting in the back can sit on the side without annoying everybody on the line? Thank you.
Shortly, so this is not a moment to leave the auditorium, it's a moment to make sure you're sitting in the middle of your row so that people who have been standing at the back can access the other seats. So please, if we can make an effort to concentrate ourselves a little bit more in the middle, that would be awesome.
Folks, I know you want to be in time for the dinner, you want to have time to change, so get moving, get closer together, have people sit everywhere so that we can continue. New call. Everybody, please sit down and be quiet so that we can get started. Thank you very much. Please sit down. Stupido. Grab your bottle of water. Go sit down, please. Thank you. Everybody, please grab a seat. All the newcomers, please join and grab a seat so that we can get the panel started.
Hi. Yeah, they were just figuring out what to do. I wanted to introduce myself. Hi. Bob, hi. I'm Sugar. I'm the deputy manager of this event tonight. I'm running around like crazy. Looking forward to seeing you guys in a more calm environment in a little bit. Yes, that's the key. First check. From my perspective, from like back in the room, that's definitely the most big. Yeah. Any other questions that you have answered right now? Okay. Yeah, you got your introduction, but sorry, I'm not this. Yeah, awesome. All right. Oh, it's right here. Yeah, you will. Okay.
Next up, we have Blue Origin, who's come here to talk to you guys. So, Wen, on to you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I'm Rosie Esposito. I am the Senior Corporate Comms Manager at Blue Origin, as well as a passionate Club for the Future ambassador. It's my pleasure to be here today with the top boss at Blue Origin, the Chief Executive Officer, and he is also the Chairman of Blue Origin's Club for the Future. And, you know, Bob is somebody, he's been in the aerospace industry for 4 decades, beginning at the Aerospace Corporation as a navigation and control analyst. And over the years, he's held a variety of positions, each with an increased leadership role. So you're going to learn a lot today from Bob. A few highlights that I pulled from his resume. He held position as Executive Director of the Space Shuttle Upgrades Development Program for United Space Alliance. From there, he joined Honeywell Aerospace as the Vice President of Advanced